Read Smart, the Baillie Gifford Prize podcast. This podcast is generously sponsored by the Blavatnik Family Foundation. Hello, and welcome to everyone joining us today on Read Smart, the official podcast for the Baillie Gifford Prize for Non-Fiction. On the 10th of October, we announced our wonderful 2024 shortlist at a live event at Cheltenham Literature Festival. Very excitingly, we're now counting down the days until the winner announcement, where our panel of judges will have to pick one favourite from this year's brilliant list. 6 extraordinary works of non-fiction which ask us to confront the past and question what it means for the future. I'm pleased to welcome one of the members of this year's judging panel, Heather Brooke, who's here to chat to us about what the process has been like so far. Heather, welcome.
Hi.
Heather, how difficult was it whittling down the long list to these 6 books? I mean, I've seen the long list. They were absolutely extraordinary, every single work. So to get down to just 6 must have been quite some process.
It was. Yeah, it really was. We all have our favorites, I think. What was interesting is that when we are reading, we all give our scores. And what's interesting is when you come into the room, you see how the other judges judged each book. And what was interesting is how we all pretty much cohered around very similar titles in terms of what we thought was quality. And then as we got narrower and narrower, there were ones that some people really liked and others weren't as keen on. And then it was very much a process of discussing the book. Sometimes people would change their mind after hearing others' arguments. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they made counter arguments. It was a really robust discussion, I have to say.
And how do you think the shortlisted books reflect current trends in non-fiction?
Well, one of the things that I kept seeing in all the books, in the long list and then in the short list, is that there are definitely themes that and stories that it's almost like an in the round, that you see them in all the different books. And the biggest one that I noticed was a reckoning with colonialism. So whether it's Indonesia, Vietnam, the British Empire, you've got Tasmania, Australia, and then sort of alongside that, there's also the atomic bomb. So these ideas about geopolitics, how they affect people intimately in life, how the trauma from big world events like war and colonialism, how that the sort of ripples that come through time, that was all rippling through all these books as well in different ways. And that was really fascinating, I thought.
I wonder how you ensure a diverse range of voices and perspectives are represented in the shortlist. And indeed, is that something that you're looking for? Do you want to make it as diverse as possible?
We do. I mean, I'm one judge, but I imagine when they're choosing the judges, that they want to get a diverse view. And I was very impressed with the diversity of our judges, because we have a selection of different people coming with different life experiences who have different views. And that is very good, because I have been on panels. I have been on one. I'm on one right now somewhere else, and it is all very homogenous. And I think the problem there is that people don't even often realize their own implicit bias about what they think is a valid story, but it actually comes through. And so I think we have a very good mix about the different types of life experience. And so we're getting a different perspective, I suppose, on what books are telling stories that interest people. So that was part of our robust discussion is, what is a valid story? And also in the content, we want diversity. So there was a lot of very heavy geopolitical books that were published last year. And we want a kind of diversity of storytelling. So not just all history or all science or all memoir. We have quite a range in both the long list and the short list of different types of nonfiction.
And I mean, they were all so readable, I found, even the sort of very, very heavy subjects. And the quality of the prose within these 6 books is something which has been commented on by other members of the judging panel. I wondered if you could speak to us a little bit about that and what made the quality so high. I mean, it's something about how it works at sentence level.
Yeah, well, partly what makes it so high is that we whittled it down from almost 350 books to 6. So these are the creme de la creme of what's been published in the last year. And just looking at the shortlist in front of me, you've got an incredible biography of Paul Gauguin, Wild Thing, that is told in such depth, but with such incredible storytelling. And she has just great metaphors throughout the book. And it was a pleasure to read. I loved reading that book. A Man of Two Faces is a memoir, but it's also a history about being a Vietnamese refugee in America. And it's written in a very experimental style and also very funny, but serious at the same time. Then you've got Story of the Heart, which is like an incredibly moving story about a young girl who dies in a car accident, and her parents decide to give her heart for an organ transfer to save the life of a young boy. And while you're reading it, you're just drawn through the story. Also, you learn just so much about medical history, about how organ transplants came into being, how many dogs had to die so that we could have open heart surgery. And you've got Richard Flanagan's book, Question 7, which is a work of art, and it's all things. It's so interesting. It's a memoir. I can't even describe it. It's quite a unique piece of work. I almost feel like he's sort of reinvented nonfiction with this book. And then you've got some heavy duty stuff. You've got Revolusi, which is the history of Indonesia, but written in a way that I found very, I don't know how you've thought it, but he interviews all different types of people. It's not just the elites or this kind of very dry official version of history. He's gone off and found like Gurkhas who are in a Nepalese nursing home, 94-year-old people, to ask them what it was like to be in Indonesia in the 50s. So that was fascinating.
I looked at that book and I thought, I mean, it's what, 600 or 700 pages long.
It's a hefty tome, yes.
And you look at it and you think, oh, Lord, the history of Indonesia. And actually, It was incredibly readable. And I mean, I was absolutely, it's compelling, isn't it?
It is. I that was probably one of the books that surprised me the most, because it has a very boring cover, if I'm honest about it. The title is not particularly compelling, but then as soon as you're into it, it's almost like he's interviewed, I think, several hundred people, and he's sort of scoured the nursing and care homes around Holland, Indonesia, Nepal to find these people, to get their eyewitness accounts of what it was like to be there during Indonesia's revolution. And it's fascinating. And then if you really want to scare yourself, you can read Nuclear War, it's just like a kind of, I'm amazed at this woman's access to people that you almost feel like you shouldn't be allowed to read this book, because it's so much sort of what you would think is top secret information about how nuclear weapons are stored and how they are on a kind of hair trigger alert, so that when anything comes into air, this scenario is in America, how everything sort of gets triggered in this domino effect, leading to quite a horrifying apocalyptic movie-like scenario that she's taken fact and then created this fictional scenario.
I wonder, I mean, apart obviously from whittling down 350 books to just 6, what the most challenging part of the selection process was for you?
I've got to say the most challenging thing is reading this volume of books. Some of these books were very hefty, like, as you say, the Revolusi book is like coming into sort of 500-600 pages. So there's that. I guess the other thing is the range of book types. You're trying to judge things that can be quite different, a memoir against a hard science book. There was definitely some books that I really would have liked to have included in the shortlist, and we had to have these debates about which book goes through. And for me, that was probably the most challenging. Is sometimes people have their favorites and they really champion those books, because you've probably spent like 5 to 8 hours, if not more, with some of these books. You feel very wedded to them in a way. You really kind of grow to love them, and you want to get those books in. I would say, most all of my books did get in. There was a couple that didn't, and I still feel a little bit sad about that.
Heather, I'm going to end on, I acknowledge, a very difficult question, but what's the one word you would use to describe this year's shortlist if you absolutely had to choose?
It's sort of a hyphenated word. I would say mind expanding. Maybe even soul expanding. Yeah.
Heather, thank you. That's absolutely wonderful. That's Heather Brooke there, who's one of the judges for this year's award. And we'd like to again thank the Blavatnik Family Foundation for its continued generous support of this podcast. If you're interested in hearing more about the brilliant books on the 2024 shortlist, we'll be speaking to all 6 authors ahead of the winners' ceremony in a special series of episodes to find out more about what inspired them to write about their chosen topics and what their craft means to them. The winner will be announced on Tuesday, the 19th of November, at an award ceremony generously supported by the Blavatnik Family Foundation. The announcement will also be live streamed across the Baillie Gifford Prize for Non-Fiction social media channels. If you're interested in finding out more about the long-listed books, you can visit our website or follow us on X, Facebook, Instagram and TikTok at BG Prize. Thank you for listening. Until next time. Read Smart, the Baillie Gifford Prize podcast. This podcast is generously sponsored by the Blavatnik Family Foundation.